Welcome into a basketball podcast called Basketball by Association. How did we do that? Well, we named it ourselves. My name is Arky Shea. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, hello, sir.
How do? And this is episode 56. And in fine fashion, let's find out episode 56 right now. Do you know there are only 3 players in NBA history who have ever worn number 56? Two of them played for the same team.
Is that even real?
That is a real thing. Looking up on Basketball Reference, which, by the way, I just love as a site. Check them out, basketballreference.com. You will find anything and everything you need to know about the NBA, ABA, and all that stuff. 3 players ever. So you get Brandon Hunter from the Celtics in 2004, wore it for 1 season. Sean Williams for the Boston Celtics in 2012, wore it for 1 season. That means by default, Arky Shea, this is the Francisco Elson episode. He played for the Denver Nuggets from 2004 to 2006, 3 whopping seasons, wearing episode 56. I feel like something special's got to happen here with that.
Wow, man, I'm going to tell you, I'm speechless.
If you've ever wondered what scraping the bottom of the barrel looks like, folks,
yeah,
reached it.
Yeah, I hope you're seeing this on YouTube because you are definitely checking the very bottom of the barrel. I'm not sure if we will see any better content the rest of the way based on how we started this year podcast. But let's see what we could do. I sort of struggled where to start with this one, but I think it's fair to start with some news that happened this week, and that is that Kevin Durant's back. Kevin Durant came back for the Nets, and he looked good. I think he only played 19 minutes, but he was really, really effective in those 19 minutes. And even though they did also lose to the Lakers, if you're hearing this, hopefully on a Sunday, last night, and lost pretty badly, too, to the Lakers at home. This team is that much closer to being fully healthy. And
sort of, because now James Harden is gone. Like, you can't get everybody in the same room together.
I'm not worried about James. James Harden's a gamer. Kevin Durant's the one I'm worried about. Kevin Durant, the guy that I worry about trying to come back multiple injuries in back-to-back feeling seasons, that I'm worried about that guy coming back and being fully healthy. James Harden's like, he doesn't get enough credit for how tough he really is. But he'll be back at some point. But Kevin Durant being back is a big deal for the Nets whenever James Harden comes back with them too. But they did Saturday night struggle with some of the physicality with the Lakers too. So let's start with Joel, your thoughts on Kevin Durant coming back and looking as effective as he did, and sort of seeing a possible NBA Finals preview without a lot of key components of that NBA Finals preview.
Well, it's not an NBA Finals preview unless Anthony Davis and LeBron James are in uniform by the time the Lakers get there. We've seen already, just how hamstrung that team is without those two. Excuse me, I have a little cough in there. And
you muted the mic. Not bad.
And I did mute the mic. I am a professional, and you've got to keep the bar raised when you're on the Francisco Elson episode. I mean, that's just the way you got to roll.
Truth.
So losing to the Lakers, not a great sign, but it's not a surprise to lose when you reintegrate a key guy like that, like Kevin Durant, who's kind of on a minutes restriction. Of course, Kyrie Irving got ejected in the third quarter with Dennis Schroeder, which, again, that hurts the Nets, but obviously it hurt the Lakers too. Schroeder's a pretty big part of what they do. We've seen Durant this season already come back a couple of times and look good already. So I'm not really surprised. I don't really take much stock in it, other than to say, check in with me once he's logged 10 games in a row, right? Okay. Does he hold up? Does he hold up for that lengthier period of time and play at that high level? And then I'm going to express some relief at that point. Because right now, it just seems like it's been a lot of these appearances. Things look okay. Then there's a setback. Then it's soreness. Then we don't know what's going on. Then Kyrie checks out because something's happening on a different planet and he's in tune with that. It has been that musical chairs type of thing. And yet Here the Nets are tied for first place with Philly. They're still that good. It really kind of boggles my mind that DeAndre Jordan is starting to rack up DNPs for them. Like, I know he's been a shadow of his former self to the point that the Nets went out and signed every buyout big man they could get, Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge and so forth. Yeah. And this may be just a period of time where they're giving DJ a rest. He may need that after having logged heavy minutes earlier on, but you would have to imagine that he's going to be back in that rotation somewhere. But then they just signed Alize Johnson to a long-term deal as well to play some spot minutes. So it's just it's an influx type of thing, and we're late enough in the season that it is starting to scare me a little bit with the Nets. I know how talented they are, but I know how talented the Clippers were last year too. And when you get into that series with a team that's really clicking on all cylinders against you, and you start to you have to revert back into damage control mode a little bit, but you don't have those protocols of here's the guy we rely on at all times. Here's everybody's role. Everybody's locked in. They know what to do in this situation. That's when the uncertainty creeps in, especially when you try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work either. And that panic, that doubt starts to creep in. That's exactly what we saw with the Clippers. And I do honestly think that the Nets are in danger of that if they run into a very well-oiled Philadelphia or Milwaukee. If they get healthy, of course, they're dealing with mega injury issues again. Or even Miami is the other spoiler team in the East that I could see them giving Brooklyn that type of problem that the Clippers ran into with the Nuggets, and even with the Mavs before that, where they just didn't look right.
Yeah, we're 20 games left in the season, right? We're 18, 20 games, 21 games left in the season. So the part that does worry me is that we're still this far down the road and we still can't get all three of these guys together. It's just one little thing after the other for someone on that team. And it's not just little things. It's significant time missed for Kyrie or KD or James Harden that you wonder, will a 10-game stretch down the end of the season, if they get it, be enough for them to sort of get lubed up and ready to go? Because that first round matchup's probably going to be okay for them. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the way, I don't know how efficient this team's going to be together. They've shown great flashes with and without each other. Putting all that talent on the court at the same time with such little time together is a portion of this that we just don't know. It's just so unknown at this point that, yeah, maybe they lose in the semifinals. We don't know. Maybe they just aren't cohesively together enough yet. We just saw the stat last night before last night that the Nets were 6-1 when he was mm-hmm. in the games until mm-hmm. last night. It's what does that mean when there's no Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving or James Harden? I don't know, man. It's just a lot of things.
And the issue is it's not even just the big three pecking order, right? It's the fact that what truly is Blake Griffin's role compared to LaMarcus Aldridge? Yes. What is Aldridge's role compared to Reggie Perry? What is Nick Claxton's role in a playoff game when things really get tight? And where does DeAndre Jordan fit into that? And I can run down the list, and Alize Johnson, will he even play in the playoffs? If we were sitting at the All-Star break and you've got all these moving parts and it's one of those classic teams that just had a flurry of moves, right at the trade deadline, we would still have those concerns and go, man, they got a lot of variables to work out with 35 games left.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that proves to be true. Well, like you said, we're down to that final countdown, and the East this year, I'm telling you folks, the Eastern Conference is good enough this year that you cannot use the first round of the playoffs as a tune-up. New York, Boston, Miami, I would even throw in Indiana in there if they get in, are good enough to make a series that will make the Nets sweat if they are all of a sudden undermanned yet, or like I said before, stuff just isn't working. Again, in the same way that how rough did the Clippers look last year in the first round when they ran into the Dallas Mavericks, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like the Mavericks were some well-oiled veteran machine, but they had some guys that have been around long enough, and Luka played a really good series, and they're well-coached, and there was enough guys there out of that core that they really gave the Clippers enough of a run for their money that I think the seeds for doubt were already being laid, that then they run into Denver, who's just played as the better team. So, like, if I'm Brooklyn, the only potential teams that I look at where I go, okay, we can maybe ease into this a little bit, is if you run into Charlotte, because they're so undermanned, yet that's, a plucky team with young legs that might steal a game or two, or maybe Chicago, right? Just because they've been that underachieving this whole time. Like anybody else, if you come in and play garbage basketball, is good enough to beat you in the first round, Atlanta included.
Sure, and one of those teams is going to get through the play-in game or play-in round, so they're going to be a little. They're going to be like already in that mode.
Great point. That's a great point. Yeah, you'll have at least a little bit of a warm-up to playoff atmosphere.
Yeah, especially since a lot of these places are going to be able to start getting fans back, and they are getting fans back. Like the Lakers just announced that they're going to unveil their banner May 12th because they're just now starting to get fans, and we'll be able to get fans coming back in because you don't want to just unveil the banner when there's no one there. Like the rings are one thing,
well,
but
you don't want to play the national anthem when no one's there either, right? Right, Mark Cuban? Let's stir that pot. No.
That's right. It's just oh, hey, we've just not been doing it, and now you guys notice. So yeah, you're completely correct, and I think I'm gonna be honest with you, both very smart on this. That Brooklyn has been getting by with on the laurels of just a plethora of talent, and they have been beating fair to Midland teams mostly by a lot. They've struggled more with the good teams, but you expect you to struggle more with good teams.
Yeah.
But when you get into playoff basketball, when it's only pretty good to really good teams,
and you're going to see them over and over and over, right?
They get to adjust to you immediately. How do you adjust? And I don't want to put this for a not nothing thing. We're talking about a guy in Steve Nash as the coach who's literally done like throw the ball out onto the court kind of moves, right? Like other than that and complaining about Trae Young climbing on the back of guys and getting fouls called for, what has Steve Nash done for this team? I mean, listen, argue it all you want, but he's got more talent than just about anybody in the East. They're the most talented team in the East. They should be 36-17 or something like that. They should be in a great position right now, provided not everyone just at one time comes down with some kind of disease. They should be in this position. It's what we do going forward. Because now, like you said, I think they're tied up with Philly for number one in the East. And that team is super talented too. But also it's got an experienced, talented coach who has been there time in and time out. And that's if you get to play them that far. And obviously if they get to play you. But there's still a lot to be figured out with this Brooklyn Nets team. You like their chances with just the talent alone, but we're still a long way from being figured out how good Brooklyn is.
And we said at the very beginning of this season, what a weird year it was going to be. Like we called this, right? Guys were going to be in and out of the lineup constantly. You were going to have injury issues a little more inconsistently, or let's say it this way, consistently inconsistent than normal because of tighter scheduling, higher workload coming back, guys playing out of position or playing out of role because of health and safety protocol absences. And all of that has come true. All of that has been almost exactly as we saw it, with the exception of, besides early on in the season, there was a lot of games that were missed and lost. It seems like the league has kind of gotten that under control, and we haven't had like a massive outage of games. But all of that it means that we can't take much of anything from this regular season. There's not a lot. There's so much uncertainty from night to night, team to team, that what do you actually learn when you beat some of these other crews? Because they're at half strength, 75%. This guy's missing. This guy's on rest. You didn't have your full starting lineup, whatever. It just seems like shifting sand as far as takeaways, a lot more than a normal regular season would go. Now, in some ways, that works to Brooklyn's favor because their talent has been enough to take advantage of those situations. And if you get into a playoff scenario where everybody else is still experiencing turbulence like that, then they're not going to be able to get into a rhythm, and they're not going to be able to kind of fall back on, again, that chemistry, that well-oiled unit, whatever it is, because you may never have all of those guys playing together. But I do think it'll be a huge advantage, as we've talked about many times on this show. If there is that team out there that is able to stay healthy down that run, that's going to be, I think, a bigger X factor than anybody understands. A team that's been together before and stays healthy through that may have an enormous advantage that outweighs the talent of their opponents. And that's the sort of series where Brooklyn could get in trouble. But again, it's been such a weird year. I don't even know if we can count on that. I keep thinking about that going, just because the playoffs begin doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything's going to even out and stabilize. It may just be a wacky playoff with a revolving door roster for a lot of these teams.
It could be. And by the way, before we move on, this whole like the Nets have been kind of like depleted kind of roster kind of thing. Like we don't know how good they are. They got trounced by the Lakers, who were without KD, without LeBron, as you mentioned. But Kyle Kuzma was out of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Wes Matthews, Marc Gasol were all out of that game. Like that team had no business being up by like nearly 30 for a huge chunk of that game against a really still pretty talented roster in Brooklyn. And that's the kind of game that makes you wonder, you know, going down the stretch. Like, hey, listen, you didn't like not everybody was out for the Nets. Like it wasn't just Steve Nash putting in for a couple of minutes and putting the shorts on for a couple of minutes. Like it's still a pretty solid team you ran out there, and you got hosed, man. You got hosed big time.
Yeah, I will say this: the Lakers, even without Davis and LeBron, and Kuzma's normally been there, but even without them, we said that that's probably a 500 roster. Like they're good enough to get wins, especially now that Drummond is there. So I don't want to take any shade. It's not like Brooklyn went out and lost to like the Rockets or the Wolves or Detroit or, you know, somebody who's truly a bottom feeder. Like the Lakers are still a playoff caliber team, even without their two big guns. But you're right. Like we're getting down to that end of the season where those become eye openers, especially if, and the game was close. Like the first half was close between them. It wasn't until the third that the Lakers kind of ran away with it. But if you're a playoff caliber team, you want to see them stem the bleeding. But there again, I'm not going to make too much into one loss because the Lakers aren't that terrible. And it's just been that weird of a year. But it does bring that pause, that overarching concern that, you know, we're running out of time, and Harden's got to come back, and they got to get games with all three of them and the supporting cast. They got to get games under everybody's belt together.
No, and it's fair, but I will just say that losing by 25, even though you still had Kyrie and Durant and Aldridge and Joe Harris, like that team shouldn't lose to that Lakers team by 25 at any point of the season, especially at home. It's one of those sort of, like you said, give you a little bit of pause, sort of pay attention to sort of result this way. And then, Lakers fans.
I think we call that like it's the classic talk radio loss, right? It's the one where all of us as the talking heads, like we're going to get really upset by that. Like, how could it happen? And then you got to remember it's 82 games. But at the same time, like the context of that is, okay, I won't make too much of this, but I'm going to file this one away, right? Yeah. Because there's some evidence that this could be bigger. It could be as big of a deal as we're making it, or at least a deal, right?
Yeah, it's not nothing. It's not nothing. But it may not. It's not the end of the world for obviously for Brooklyn, but it is something that makes you go, how much do I like the Nets?
Yeah,
how much?
That's a great way of putting it.
How much would I wager on them right now if I'm Arky? I don't know. Maybe not nearly as much as I was thinking before.
How much fun? I know you're going to segue, and you can just give me like a 3-word answer. Sure. How much fun will it be? I feel like there's the almost inevitability that we get a Nets-Knicks first round.
Oh man, God! Well, listen,
like I'm not wishing it on the Knicks, like, oh, they're going to get slaughtered or anything. I just feel like we've only gotten that a few times in history because they've rarely been good at the same time, right? Rarely been good at the same time, and it feels like a fun year for a crosstown series.
Listen, the Knicks played them tough earlier this week. Like I think last Monday night or something. Like it was like a 2-point game or something.
Yeah.
So, and that's again with still good players in the lineup. The Knicks are one of those punchy teams, one of those ones that could give Philly or Brooklyn or Milwaukee some kind of trouble if they're not into it and ready for the start of the playoffs.
As a Knicks fan, I see you didn't kind of jump at the opportunity to play Brooklyn. As a Knicks fan, what would you feel like would be the most fun first-round matchup? I'm not saying the most likely that the Knicks actually pull off an upset or anything like that, but the most fun. Well, yeah. I mean, you can go that route, I guess, if you want. But most fun first-round matchup where you're like, I really want to see that win or lose. I'm going to get my money's worth in that matchup.
It's a toss-up between me for Philly and Brooklyn. It's not Milwaukee. Okay. Milwaukee doesn't do that much for me. Okay. I'd really love to just watch sort of Julius Randle and sort of him square off some with Joel Embiid. I'd like to see him. And what he would do is basically try to do a hip toss every time they came down to the block.
Right.
Because he's not going to be able to hold up with them for 35, 40, 45 minutes in the game. But Julius Randle is having a phenomenal type season, and he could go a game or two where he may be the better or close to Joel Embiid. I worry about the Brooklyn aspect is a very, very much if fully healthy, I could see Brooklyn winning in 3 games. Like the potential for their boom is so big.
Yeah.
That that first round matchup, they could just, although Tom Thibodeau has done you warned coming in this podcast, a phenomenal job of getting this team defensively ready to grind. They grind and they grind and they grind. But that may only get you 1 game against Brooklyn.
Right.
But defense travels, so it may give you a little bit of a shot, but I still probably would prefer Philadelphia in that mode for the first round than I would Brooklyn, because Brooklyn's the most likely for my team to get embarrassed, I think.
Okay. And I've oddly enough, I've seen a lot of the Knicks Sixers matchups this year. It seems like when I turn on the Knicks, they're playing Philly, it just so happens to be. And those have been fun games. All year long, those have been pretty fun matchups. So I can see that.
Yeah, and they've gone the Knicks' way, very defensively for the most part. It's not been a 125-119 game. They're 101-99 kind of games, which is how the Knicks are going to have to win ball games. How they have been winning ball games because they're clearly slotted very comfortably in the 8th spot right now. Charlotte needs to start losing games. I got to be honest with you. Although today they lost, so that's good.
Yeah.
Barely, with the Hawks out without everybody. Oh man, did you watch any? Did you see Miles Bridges dunk?
I have not yet. I just saw the headlines, flinging across my phone and had saved it for later.
Yeah, well, you know what? While we're getting this this next story started talking about, I'll interrupt it at some point to give you the video of it, because it is just, it's stupid is what it is. What Miles Bridges may have murdered Clint Capela, and that's barely. And by the way,
911, I'd like to report a murder, please.
what is the Hornets broadcaster? Is it Eric Collins? Does that sound right? Eric Collins?
I don't remember.
He has a phenomenal call of this. So since this is going to be video on the old YouTubes, we'll be able to play this. Probably, the NBA won't know. So anyway, I'll get that ready for you while I bring up the fact that my Denver Nuggets are the hottest team in the NBA right now. 8 straight games. Excuse me. I didn't mean
No, see, now you got a cough.
Yeah, sorry.
I turned off my mic, and you couldn't honor the memory of Francisco Elson enough to turn off your microphone.
Sorry, you were much more professional than I am. But my Nuggets, man, they doing the thing. They in 4th spot, and they're not only lingering, but they're surging. And I want to start by just asking you this question. When we're done in, the next month-ish, are the Nuggets hosting first-round playoffs?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Are they going to catch up to the number 1 seed? I don't think so, because they're still 5.5 games back. And Utah 8-2 in their last 10, Phoenix 8-2 in their last 10. The Clippers continue to win at their pace. Nobody ahead of Denver is really slowing down, even as Denver is playing that well. And with only a month left to go. And like you said, about 20 games for everybody, 25 games. I just don't think there's enough time for the Nuggets to overcome that. Maybe they can climb up into the 3rd seed and bypass the Clippers, or if somebody takes a nosedive here. But yeah, I think hosting in the first round, I think oddly enough, we may be trending, and this is not in the Nuggets' favor, especially if all of a sudden, WWE style, LeBron James and Anthony Davis walk through the tag team door right away at the beginning of the first round. But oddly enough, we could wind up with a Nuggets-Lakers rematch, but it's in the first round this time. And now all of a sudden, it's not necessarily the Lakers who are the heavy favorites, right? At that point, it's, oh, they're rusty and, they've still got the championship pedigree and all that stuff. But Denver, the better Denver plays and the more chemistry they show, the more our expectations go right back up for that team, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a double-edged sword here, because we may not recognize whatever the accomplishments are if it's like, oh, no, Denver's good enough to win a championship, and we are only left with the possibility for disappointment unless they get that ring this year.
Yeah. I'll continue on that in just a moment, but here's the Miles Bridges dunk from us. Hold on. There we go. Hold on. Put it back. There we go.
Bridges! Oh my God! A thunderbolt from Bridges!
All right, so I will give mad respect to the call.
Yes.
Capela stayed on his feet, so it's not like
he got embarrassed. That's an embarrassing moment.
It's an embarrassing moment, but it's not like Pippen over Ewing or Kemp over was it? It wasn't Benoit Benjamin. It's not the Kemp dunk against the Warriors where you took the guy off his feet. So yes, absolutely great dunk. I'll still take Anthony Edwards over Yuta Watanabe for dunk of the year, just absolutely obliterating somebody.
Okay, hold on. Let me play it again. Just if that's what you want to make it. And add the call to your thoughts too.
Cody Zeller offensive rebound.
Right. He stands him up and he dunks over him, and his momentum carries him back, and he throws it down. Phenomenal dunk, not the dunk of the year. Sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
I will say I've seen 2 dunks better than that this year and a couple as good. So it's up there. It's top 5, definitely top 10.
All right, you're not completely disrespecting him.
No.
Okay.
And the call makes it even better, because I'm sure, like in TV, when you're watching it on TV, everything does seem a little slower. It slows down by just that split second. And I'm sure sitting in the arena watching it in real time is probably what's helping to fuel that call. I'm sure, as a live wire dunk, probably phenomenal. So I'll give it absolutely that respect.
That call was legit, though. By the way,
he had the caffeine that I've been searching for all day.
I do want to. We're gonna get back to the Nuggets in just a second, but I do want to mention this because it may get brought up later. And I want to say that I said it first. What's happening with the Hornets now, with the injuries that they're dealing with, and the fact that they're still fighting, and I think they're still 4th, right? They're 5th now. They're 5th after their loss today. They're a game out of 4th spot because they had straight up to the Hawks today. It's a little, and listen, they may drop out of the playoffs completely by the time we get to it. It's a little Indiana-y for me last year, a team that I thought was just going to fall completely apart with the Oladipo injury, and just maintained. They maintained enough, and they were a tough out, and they were well coached, and they still kept winning games when you thought this team should be getting beat by 40 every game. And Brent, they have
no, they should not be getting beat by 40.
So listen, they're out Ball, they're out Hayward. Yep. Those are 2 huge pieces on that team to be out. Like they should be losing games.
But at the beginning of the season, Ball was coming off the bench, playing about 20 minutes per game. And it was Devontae Graham and Terry Rozier who got them off to a decent start already. And Bridges and PJ Washington have both had kind of eye-opening, oh yeah, they've arrived type of years. So Ball then came in, and that's what supercharged them to really take off when he was able to take over the starting job. And they were down Graham for part of that time, and other guys have had to step up. Gordon Hayward has been a big part of what they do, but let's not forget that Hayward has been out of the lineup for extended periods of time twice already this year, and then has been able to come back. So it's, yes, they lost two big pieces, but it's pieces that they have been semi-successful without already. Are they deep enough to get into a playoff series, a 7-game series, and beat somebody? No. I do think that Charlotte is one of the few teams in the Eastern Conference that is not going to win a first-round playoff series regardless of the matchup, unless, miraculously Hayward is back healthy. And even then, I think it would have taken LaMelo Ball, and then I would have given them that shot. But they've got enough in the starting lineup yet, and enough bench guys who at least come in and do their jobs. And like you said, they fight and they scrap. Even if talent-wise, they're kind of replacement-level players, it's enough to keep them afloat and in the playoff picture. I don't see Charlotte, suddenly going like 8-12 over these last 20 or something bad in a 5-15. I don't see that happening where they're going to be bad enough to just fall out of the playoff picture. I think they're going to still be in it at least into the playoff tournament. And in that case, in a 1-game scenario, yeah, I think they can beat anybody in that. They just can't sustain that for a series.
Yeah, listen. I'll give all the credit in the world that needs to be given to a Cody Zeller or a Brad Wanamaker or something, but that team is not as good as his record is right now. That team is fortunate to be where they are because of how they got there with Lonzo Ball and yes, with Gordon Hayward, and they're good enough to sort of maintain now. But that's why every game counts in the NBA right now.
Right?
Yes,
every game, because that cushion they built is what they're going to have to ride out. It's the same thing with the Lakers. You got to ride that cushion out for right now as far as you can and play 500 basketball and hope that you get a little healthier by the playoff time.
Yeah. So I want to go back now to Denver. I don't want to sort of disrespect them, but if you think about what we're looking at in the West, the top of the West is Utah, Phoenix, who you've got to be a little surprised that they're still this good this far down the stretch. And then the Clippers and Nuggets, like 3 of the 4, well, I guess one of the 4 being the Nuggets, we thought could have been there, but they started off really poorly. But at least half of that top 4, excuse me, are teams that kind of coming out of, I don't want to say, we're not used to seeing this good and maintain it this long into the season for this big of or this long of a duration. And with like a month left in the season, a little over a month left in the season, it's really impressive. It's really impressive considering who's around them.
It's a huge sign of maturity for Phoenix. Huge sign that they've been able to keep it up this long. Whether that maturity translates into a tough 7-game series, in the second round or even the Western Conference Finals, that's going to be the true test for them. But I do think like Utah's been around in the playoff picture enough times before, and the sign of maturity that they've been able to hold on to the number 1 seed. There still is the show me question mark, just like there is with the Clippers.
But that's only going away in the playoffs.
Correct. Exactly. I don't doubt their credentials, though, that they belong. Those 2 teams, Utah and the Clippers, absolutely belong. Now, what they do with that, we'll find out. We have to take the we'll see cop out because there's no track record beyond that. And Denver's in the same boat, but Denver was good enough to get to the conference finals, and we've seen them turn things around. We've seen how good they can be down this stretch. But we've seen Utah before. I've said this multiple times on the show, put together phenomenal runs during the regular season and then kind of cool off. To their credit, they have not cooled off this year. They've kept that same pace and had a couple of monumental runs on top of that. So the Lakers are there as the shark, roving under the water. It's there, and LeBron and Anthony Davis are going to come back at some point, and then the game completely changes because it's a true test for all those other teams. It's not a test for the Lakers. It's a test for everybody else and what they do with it. But if they're not healthy enough, or if those other teams answer that call, which I think they're talented enough to do, I don't think we should be surprised if Utah, the Clippers, or Denver gets to the NBA Finals. I'm even of the mind that I wouldn't be surprised if Portland makes the NBA Finals this year, just because it is a weird year. I will be surprised if Phoenix makes the NBA Finals, and that's just the youth factor, the classic, NBA kind of rise where you win a round, then you lose, and the next year you come back and you win another round, and you just kind of build towards that sort of thing. It's very rarely that you get like a flash in the pan team that just immediately skyrockets into the finals, because there's so many games you have to win against so many quality opponents. And I'm not calling Phoenix a flash in the pan. It just feels like, okay, tip of the cap to your regular season. It's a whole different ball game when you get to the playoffs, and you guys haven't really done that before outside of Chris Paul.
No, that's true. And that's why I think that's why I like Denver coming into this season. That's why I like the chances of Utah if they continue to play obviously well. They're showing no signs that they're just going to squirrel away and hide. And again, there's the great unknown with that shark and the Los Angeles Lakers, that we know that they're super good. They're defending champs. It's just when KD comes back, when AD comes back, and when LeBron comes back, what do those guys look like when they come back? Because again, LeBron
and how do they integrate playing with Andre Drummond, right? Because there's this new piece that they will never have played with before.
Yep.
The good news in all of that, though, for the Lakers is that LeBron and Anthony Davis are two of the rarest type of superstars where they don't really play a particular way. Like, you can plug them in with just about any style and it works. And Andre Drummond is the type of star who does star things without really getting plays run for him, right? Mm-hmm. As a dirty work guy. So I think the level of chemistry needed, the learning curve, is a lot lower for that group of three than, for example, like KD and Kyrie and James Harden playing together, because great as they are, two of those three play in a certain way historically, and trying to fit that all together takes a little bit more nuance and intricacy to make that happen.
Yeah, a little more. Not much. Okay, a lot more. Actually, it's going to it'll take a minute. Okay, so let's end this podcast with a little local news for Mr. Joel C. Cortez.
Thank you. I was hoping you wouldn't skip that.
Good. The Minnesota Timberwolves. You're beating my Knicks for no reason, Timberwolves. And if they cost the Knicks a playoff spot or a spot in the so help you God. So help you God.
I will not put out any flaming bags that show up on my porch with my boot. I'll say that much.
Oh, you better, because there's more than that than you expect. They're about to be sold to Alex Rodriguez and some guy named Marc Lore. I don't really know him. Mm-hmm. They're nearing minority stakes deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves, with the plan to eventually take control of the franchise in 2 years, and they'll take it away. I shouldn't say take it away. Purchase very handsomely from Glenn Taylor, and they sent out a statement that said, "We look forward to entering this phase of the process with Glenn Taylor. Our respect for him and the legacy he has built lays an amazing foundation for what is to come. We are excited by the prospect of getting to know the Timberwolves organization, the talented team, and their incredible fans." And it's signed Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore. They're also going to be buying the Minnesota Lynx as well, it looks like. And I want, listen, I could care less. Ownership, Alex Rodriguez, whatever. But it's your team. It's your team, just like you would expect if someone were buying my team from James Dolan. Mm-hmm. So your team is being sold to Alex Rodriguez. That's not a no-name billionaire that's just hanging out there. What are your thoughts on your team being sold to one of the cleanest baseball players I've known?
First of all, it's good that the team is being sold. Taylor's sell-by date came and went a long time ago. Taylor's got to get a lot of credit, and I'm thankful when I see most articles that they mention this. Like in 1994, when he bought the team, they were halfway out the door, despite having been an expansion franchise just 5 years before that. They were halfway out the door to New Orleans or Kansas City or somewhere else. Like, it just was not going well. And he came in with the mandate that they are never going to leave Minnesota. And so he gets a ton of respect for having saved the franchise and saved basketball in Minnesota. Because I do think, like, if Minneapolis St. Paul is the city that lost both the Lakers back in the day and then another pro basketball team, you ain't never getting one back. Like it's not happening. So to have done that and then to continue with the mandate of I will not sell the team unless someone is guaranteeing to me that they will stay in Minnesota is also worthy of respect. Everything else that's come through that, they had success tied to Kevin Garnett. Taylor alienated Garnett. They have not had sustained success since Garnett left, and you continue to alienate Kevin Garnett.
Hey, let me
just
ask you,
bad mark on Taylor's reign.
Before you keep going, because I do want to hear more about his reign. What did he do to sort of alienate Garnett? I'm not fully aware of his actions.
So back when Garnett was a Timberwolf, you had the under-the-table dealing with Joe Smith that cost the team multiple draft picks, and you began to erode any trust of common sense in the franchise, and Garnett continued to labor then for year after year, and it was playoff appearance after playoff appearance to get bounced in the first round, and they were always undermanned because they were missing those draft picks. So that was starting to erode. Garnett wanted out. Taylor did one of those, is he giving us everything he had type of things, even as everybody else is saying, yes, absolutely he did. Did you not watch the guy play? He goes to Boston. And then in coming back, this is where it really got bad. In Garnett coming back at the end of his career, that was to play for Flip Saunders. Flip had kind of, he was coaching the team again. He had been Garnett's coach back at the beginning of Garnett's career. And they had sustained success together as well. So he came back for Flip. Flip was kind of the go-between between Taylor and Garnett, who were a little bit icy to each other. And it was always with the understanding that Flip Saunders was going to move into an ownership role after coaching the team. And Garnett was also going to come into an ownership role with him as well. Saunders unfortunately passed away. And there's the feeling that Taylor then reneged on all of those promises because he hires Sam Mitchell as the interim coach. Sam Mitchell was like the veteran guy along with Terry Porter that at the beginning of Garnett's career took him under their wing and taught him the ropes. So Garnett has enormous respect for Sam Mitchell. Mitchell's the coach, then all of a sudden gets fired at the end of the year without really even a chance to interview or do anything. They just go that different direction with Tom Thibodeau. Garnett was furious over that. Then Taylor saying, well, I don't think I'm going to sell the team to a Garnett-led organization, and Garnett then promptly retires. They've never retired Garnett's number. They continue to bait each other in the media. Garnett has tried to jump on board with multiple different ownership groups, and if Garnett's involved, Taylor has shut it down. So there's bad blood there. And as a Timberwolves fan, how could I not side with Kevin Garnett in all of this? Like, Taylor, as much as I respect some of the good things he's done, has just kind of been a D-bag about all this. Like, there's no other way to put this. And
like Kevin Garnett sounds like he's trying to do everything he can to be a part of this franchise.
Yes, that he is that committed. And why should he be, right? You'd think he'd be that committed to Boston. Like, it's just a huge sign of loyalty from Garnett to keep doing this. And deep down, what I hope happens is that in 2023, Rodriguez and Lors get the team outright. And by 2024, Garnett is a minority partner with that group. Like, that's what I really hope, because that would be a sign that long-term the team is going to stay in Minnesota the way that hopefully it should be. As bad as they've been, like, that's the way it should be. And I will say this, like, as bad of an owner as Glenn Taylor has been with the Timberwolves record-wise, the Minnesota Lynx have 4 championships, right? So he has been the owner of a winning organization on the other side. What I am really concerned about is that we know Alex Rodriguez has ties to Seattle, like big ties to Seattle. Yeah. And Lore supposedly does too. I don't know much about him yet either. And there has not been a statement from Rodriguez and Lores or from Taylor going, it is a mandate. It's legally binding within this contract. You will not move the team for at least 10 years, something like that, to try to smooth things over. That scares me. That scares me a lot, that I'm looking at this almost like a Seattle and Oklahoma City sort of situation where the team has not played well over the last few seasons. It's got talent, but every time you think they're going to be better, they're just as bad. Viewership has been way down. Attendance has been way down because of that. A lot of that goes back to just the feeling of hopelessness around Glenn Taylor. And for the diehards of us who continue to watch, there's not enough of us around. And then if there's greener pastures out there in the Emerald City, like, that could be a big draw to try to get them out there. And then there's nothing you can really do about it, especially if these guys are coming in with the preconceived notion of, yeah, we'll say all the right things, but really we're going to start greasing the wheels to move this team to where we want a team anyway.
Yeah, I think the NBA would love more than just about anything to get a team back out to Seattle. But a lot of the reporting we've read is that the NBA wants to expand a couple of teams, and Seattle would be no doubt, obviously one of those teams, and the other would be somewhere like maybe a Louisville, perhaps. But
maybe Kansas City,
perhaps
maybe Tampa. Yeah, those places have been floated out there.
So I would be surprised if the NBA would even enter into this sort of idea of allowing them to relocate, especially since all the infrastructure is there for Minnesota, and you don't want to just give a new team to Minnesota, because they're going to, I would say they would want to keep it in Minnesota. And if they have plans in the next handful of years to expand, then Seattle's going to be one of those cities that would get the team anyway. So
now, that's pre-COVID logic, and I would agree with all of that. But with the league not struggling financially, but up against major headwinds, just like everybody else is, I do think that some of that logic gets challenged in that maybe expansion, which looked like it was coming down the pipeline faster than we thought, suddenly is delayed. And it's not like there's a long basketball legacy that the Timberwolves have built in Minnesota. There just isn't. There's the Kevin Garnett legacy in Minnesota, and that's it. The rest of it is like a tiny footnote of, hey, they were good and they had some good players sometimes, but more often than not, they're the worst pro sports franchise in the United States. Like, so to take that team and go, yeah, it sucks to take them from Minnesota, but it's more important for us to get basketball in Seattle. And at this rate, we're not going to get basketball in Seattle for a few more extra years than we thought. Like, I could really see that happening. And then them going, we will now take pitches from any of the expansion cities like we would. And guess what? Minneapolis, St. Paul, you're back into that boat with everybody else bidding. But I guarantee you there's no way they get a team back after that. It's if you lose the Lakers and the Timberwolves, it's not happening.
Yeah, I think if I were to sort of prognosticate, I would say that Minnesota keeps that team, especially. Now, I'm sure Mr. Taylor has vetted Alex Rodriguez in this ownership opportunity to make sure that there is no current Kevin Garnett, money into it. But not to say that there wouldn't be at least maybe a little wink and a nod, because once it's no longer Glenn Taylor's team, guess whose team it can be? Anybody that Alex Rodriguez and Marc want to sell a little bit of a stake to, or
right. And then please, for the love of all that is good in this world, please retire Kevin Garnett's number.
That would happen night one, don't you think? I feel like night one of the new Alex Rodriguez era would be Kevin Garnett retiring.
And it's not just, this was like an iconic guy, a Hall of Fame guy. This is a guy who did take your woe-begone franchise to the Western Conference Finals, which for a lot of teams doesn't mean all that much. But for Minnesota, that means an enormous amount. And then the amount of loyalty that he's shown to have not only come back and ended his career with you, which I know a lot of a lot of players will do that, and it's kind of just a symbolic thing. But to come back and be an active mentor to Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins at that time, to be an active guy with Flip Saunders and with this repeated intention of saying, I want to be a part of the franchise. I want to buy into this. Like, that means so much more than just the career he put together on the court, which, by the way, is a Hall of Fame level career and deserves a jersey retirement anyway.
Sure. I mean, I can't. I keep going back to the fact that he's trying desperately, for what reason, to go to Minneapolis, St. Paul, to try to be a part of that franchise when they've done nothing. Ownership has done nothing but poo on him. Done nothing but say, why? No, leave us alone. Whatever. We're not big fans of yours. Bye.
And this is where the unfortunateness, and it's trite to say this because it's somebody's life and obviously somebody's family too, but this is where the high unfortunateness of Flip Saunders passing away when he did just almost adds like a Greek level tragedy to all this, and that you had a path forward. You had everybody like on the same page. The team was playing better at that point. Like there was a light at the end of the tunnel and a succession plan for Taylor to be able to turn the reins over to two guys who truly have been as invested into Minnesota basketball as Taylor was, because as bad of a franchise owner as he's been at times, he has been very invested in keeping that team in Minnesota. So keep that rolling, and instead you have a tragic death, and you then have the petty like personality conflict just come in, and it may threaten the future of the franchise in Minnesota in one fell swoop, because now a different ownership group comes in, and who knows what they wind up doing with them.
That's why I think some people on Twitter were like, oh, 2023 Tampa Bay Timberwolves. You're like, oh, no.
Timberwolves have to go warm up somewhere during the middle of the winter too. And I had this, I know we got to end soon. I had this thought the other night. If they move, am I a Seattle SuperSonics fan now? Like, is that who I am? I've always been a Spurs fan, kind of as like my second team. It's always been San Antonio. Do I change? Like, those are the thoughts that go through your mind, which I'm sure SuperSonics fans had when the team, went to OKC.
Yeah.
And yes, it's silly because it's like, I'm not a part of the organization. They took my money and they provided me some entertainment. That's all it is. It's a business transaction. But you spend a lot of, your time rooting for a team and watching them and kind of going through the ups and downs and those shared memories that you have with your buddies or with family members or whatever. It is a part of the fabric of your life, even as, ridiculous and small as it is in the grand scheme of things. Like, it is a part of your personality. And I've always been like the weird Timberwolves fan among so many other NBA fans in the media and that sort of thing. And it would be sad, and it's strange to actually have to look down the barrel of that and go, that is a possibility. Like, you as a Knicks fan, the Knicks are never leaving New York. James Dolan hopefully will sell at some point, and not to one of his kids, but or something like that, or some great grandnephew that you've never heard of who comes in and is his clone. But you don't have to worry about the Knicks ever leaving. Like, that legacy is always there, for better and worse.
Yeah, so that's why I would go ahead and take this opportunity to invite you, while the price is low, to get into New York Knicks fandom.
That's not happening.
Why not? You go into a different conference, right? You don't have to feel loyal. You don't have to feel like you're going to betray your team by rooting for someone you rooted against for decades. So how about the nice color team?
And orange is my favorite color, but full well
logo.
So around me in the background, for those of you watching on YouTube, are the jerseys, and there's a whole lot more. This is my bar in my basement, and there's a whole lot of jerseys and memorabilia and stuff, most of it 90s oriented, that I've collected over the years. And it's just kind of the motif of my man cave. Almost every team is represented in some way, be it a jersey or a pennant or even like old NBA belt buckles that were released in the late 80s, just weird stuff like that. The only teams that are not represented down here are the Lakers and the Knicks, in an official way at least. There's posters with players on them and that sort of thing. And people always ask me why that is. Or, I'll wear the NBA t-shirts and that sort of thing. The only ones who are not represented, the Lakers and the Knicks. I've never liked those franchises, even as there's been specific teams that I could iterations of them that I was okay with. But the big market teams just have it easier than everybody else just because of their geography. And I'm enough of a inferiority complex guy to really not like that. So I'm not going to root for the front runners. It's the same reason, like, why would you ever, if you're out in the ether as an NFL fan, why would you ever go cheer for the Dallas Cowboys? Like, why would you do that? You can choose somebody else that's good at the time if you want, but don't choose for like the ones who had so much handed to them on a silver platter. I can't help it that the Knicks took the silver platter and then like washed it in the toilet, but they still have the silver platter. Like, they had it.
I'm a Cowboys fan, so
Are you really?
I am, but like,
how did I just learn this about you? You're a Dallas Cowboys fan and a New York Knicks fan?
Yeah, but I don't think that's a very common combination. Like, I was 8 when I became a fan of the Cowboys, and I just happened to see them in the Super Bowl. Like, I was like, all right, it's the first team I sort of knew, and they did win the game, and so I was like, all right, I can root for this team. And since
I'll say this as a kid, the silver and blue color scheme, that's a pretty swaggy color scheme when you're 8 years old. I'll agree with that. But
it is. Thank you, Captain. So anyway, I'll keep your seat warm over here if you want to the Knicks fandom, because again, you can root for a team that's been really crappy for a long time. And again, it's not like the Knicks have like 14 championships. But do you know how many championships the Knicks have?
2.
Yeah.
Okay, they still have 2, and they still have other finals appearances. And you're right. They've been dysfunctional of their own making for so long. This would be like getting out of a bad marriage, and you go through a divorce, and suddenly you're a free agent, and you're looking around and going, what I want to do is get married immediately to someone exactly like what I just got out of. I want to do that exact same thing. Like, that logic doesn't make sense. If I'm getting out of Timberwolves fandom, if that happens, heaven forbid. Now, I may just stick with them if they go to Seattle. But why would I choose the Knicks, who are basically doing what the Timberwolves have done? Like, at that point, I might as well become a Spurs fan or just choose whoever seems to be good at that point and halfway like cohesive. Like, don't make the same mistake again.
Listen, I get it. The Knicks are toxic.
I don't want a second divorce, Arky Shea.
We could live like my relationship with the Knicks is like being in a toxic relationship where we live on both ends, either end of a house, like a very large house.
Right.
Like, sometimes I'll come over and be like, hey, how you doing? And then James Dolan will yell at Charles Oakley, and I'm like, okay, we're not doing good. Fine, I'll just walk over here. All right, that's going to do it for us on Basketball by Association. We'll be back on Wednesday. Joel, thank you for your time again, my friend.
Thank you, listeners, for checking us out here on the YouTubes. And thank you for Francisco Elson for, inspiring such a wonderful, wonderful show.
We could not have been inspired by a more inspirational player. That's true. All right, we'll see you.